announced that he has restored voting rights for 13,000 felons on a case-by-case basis. And he will be announcing that tomorrow. Donald Trump is also laying the groundwork for claims of voter fraud. A brand new television ad airing in several swing states says that the system is rigged. The Trump campaign is spending $5 million to run the commercials, trying to fire up Republicans in states where early voting gets underway in a few weeks, like North Carolina, for example, where the courts have struck down a voter ID law that judges said targeted African Americans. Our Fox News senior correspondent Eric Shawn digs deeper into these concerns. So you don't need an ID to vote?
Well, it depends on what state you're in, if it's a photo ID or not, if you have an affidavit. You know, Maria, for years I've covered and investigated voter and election fraud cases here at Fox News, and you won't believe what we found. Take a look at this. These are absentee ballots that were faked. Prosecutors in Troy, New York, said politicians simply stole elections by handing in fraudulent ballots that they filled out as real votes. The unsuspecting voters we talked to said they did not even know their votes were robbed. So you didn't write that?
I did not.
You didn't cast a ballot?
I did not.
Did you vote?
No.
Did you fill out an absentee ballot? Nope. Did you fill out an absentee ballot application? Nope. Still any of those. So your vote was a fraud? It was. In Kentucky, prosecutors said 20 public officials stole elections by buying votes, spending $400,000 to buy 8,000 votes over several elections. You sold your vote. How much did you sell your vote for? $25. Well, in Cincinnati, veteran poll worker Hillary Richardson was charged with voting in the 2008 and 2012 presidential election not once, but 2 and 3 times. She pled no contest to 4 counts, including voting for her sister, who had been in a coma for a decade. In Pennsylvania, 7 election officials have been hit with election fraud charges just in the last year and a half, from cases of illegal voting to tampering with voting machines and adding phony votes. You know, a 2012 report by Philadelphia Republican City Commissioner found voting by non-registered individuals, voting divisions with more votes than voters, individuals voting more than once, and voting by non-U.S. citizens. And election fraud actually hit the race for the White House in the 2008 race. Democratic operatives in Indiana were convicted of faking signatures on the presidential petitions that put then Senator Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton on the ballot. So many signatures were phony that authorities said the president may not have actually had enough signatures to qualify for the primary ballot. Is that your signature on this?
That's not my signature.
Did you sign this petition for Barack Obama?
No.
You did not?
No.
I did not sign for Barack Obama.
So someone forged this?
That's correct.
Well, so this is how it works in Indiana. It is unbelievable. You need 500 signatures from each congressional district in Indiana. In South Bend, President Obama qualified with 534 signatures. The prosecutors said 100 to 200 signatures were faked, so that brings the Obama number down below the legal number that he needed to qualify. The prosecutor told me, had this been caught at the time, Maria, the president probably would not have qualified for the ballot, would have been bounced from that primary ballot, but all this fraud wasn't caught until 3 years after the election.
This is unbelievable, Eric. You've done such good work on this. We want to bring in, so congratulations, thank you. John Fund is with us. He's columnist for National Review magazine. John, thank you very much for joining us, and you two have done so much work on this. First off, the Terry McAuliffe situation in Virginia tomorrow, what's your sense? Would that classify as potentially raising a red flag for potential voter fraud?
Well, felons aren't allowed to vote until they get their rights restored. They've proved themselves to be part of the mainstream of society. What Terry McAuliffe is doing is not on a case-by-case basis. He's trying to put every felon back on the voter rolls, including 232 serious sex offenders. So there was no distinction made between what kind of crime you committed and the kind of people Terry McAuliffe wanted to get back their voting rights to.
So that could basically come under review in terms of whether or not
the Supreme Court has already slapped him down and said he can't do it for all 200,000. So now he's trying to do it for a small segment of that group.
How worried are you? What's your reaction to Eric's report?
Well, we have a sloppy, inefficient system. So sometimes you don't know when the sloppiness ends and the fraud begins because the sloppiness feeds into the fraud. We make it so easy for people to vote in someone else's name. In New York City, investigators from the New York City Department of Investigation went out and tried to vote in the names of people who were out of state, dead, or in felons. And 61 out of 63 times they were handed ballots. One of the times, the 2 times they weren't, is because somebody was trying to vote in the name of the son of one of the poll workers. So the point is, there's a 97% success rate, because if you don't have an ID law, as Eric said, in half the states you don't, there is no way to really catch someone, and once they vote, it goes in the ballots with all the other ballots, and you can never segregate it out and find out where the fraud is.
Eric.
You know, we saw in 2008 the Norma Coleman, Al Franken race, that they separated by 341 votes. It wasn't until later that studies found at least 1,000 felons they believe illegally voted in that race.
And 200 were convicted.
200 convicted, yeah.
Okay.
So, but that still didn't get to the 341. But it
was
shows.
found out after he was sworn in. He didn't do anything.
I mean, these no ID states, it's just mind-boggling. Who's to stop anybody from voting 4 times?
Here's my point. I don't think there are very many people who don't have an ID, but if there are, let's get them one, because you can't participate in the mainstream of American life. You can't get a job, you can't get a government benefit, you can't get on Medicare, you can't travel, you can't cash a check. But these groups that are fighting voter ID laws, if they spent all those legal fees on actually getting people IDs, we wouldn't have this debate.
Are we going to see any efforts to stop this, to make sure that we actually see a system that is fair?
Well, the election officials I've talked to, they say that they are confident that any fraud will be caught. They point to these cases, for example, as evidence of that. And in Rhode Island and in New Hampshire, the Secretary of States there say the way to do it is to have an ID, but with an affidavit. That if you don't have the photo ID, you fill out an affidavit. Your vote then has a paper trail to be challenged later if there's any type of
And those secretaries of states are Democrats, by the way.
They are.
And they're honest, anti-fraud Democrats. I think the real issue here is that we have to get groups, outside groups, not necessarily affiliated with campaigns. They're nonpartisan groups like TrueTheVote.org out of Texas, which is a national organization. If you watch people, if you have people who pressure prosecutors to pay attention to this as a priority, you can reduce voter fraud. It's like shoplifting. If you do 3 things in shoplifting, you reduce shoplifting 40%. Put up a camera even if you don't turn it on. Have a security guard even if he's asleep. But put up a sign that says prosecutions will take place.
Yeah.
You cut shoplifting by 40%. It's the same thing with voter fraud.
Well, there's also the whole idea, if the IRS is going to target conservatives, right? I mean, that's another part of this, because people are saying you're quieting down an enormous group by targeting them and making them unable to participate.
But there's no evidence in all of these court cases, including the ones you mentioned, there was no evidence that anyone had ever been prevented from actually voting. No names were put forward. The issue here is we have 2 civil rights. The civil right to, of course, vote, not to be intimidated. That's why we have a Voting Rights Act.
Right.
But we also have a civil right not to have your vote canceled out by someone who shouldn't be voting, someone who's dead, someone who's a felon. If you get your vote canceled out, it's as if you didn't vote.
Right. Well, I know, Eric, you're going to be doing more work on this. It's an important subject. Thank you so much.
Be on it.
Eric Shawn and John Fund, good to see you, sir. Thank you. Let's get a look at what's coming up top of the hour. Media Buzz. Here's Howie Kurtz in Los Angeles today. Hi, Howie.